Now, in the same spirit of defending party members that, of course, we have witnessed from the ODM party doing with Honorable Edwin Sifuna, it's also very important to take a look at what happened yesterday, where Honorable Matiang'i, the deputy party leader of the Jubilee party, alongside the party secretary general Jeremiah Kioni, now took it to the stage to defend President Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president of this country, against the allegations that have been previously made against him. Now, just a brief background of what's going on. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been blamed largely, including by members of the ODM party, to actually be infiltrating the decisions of political parties, while with the other side of his mouth promoting democracy and also promoting the sustainability of democracy within the country. Now, other members of the ODM party believe that it is because of President Uhuru Kenyatta, that is why there is no uniform position when it comes to whether or not the party is supporting the broad-based arrangement. Of course, including Senator Junet, who wrote that particular letter calling for the whipping of Sifuna. When asked what the party position was, he said there is no solid party position, but the party is looking towards a coalition, of course, with the broad-based arrangement in the 2027 major polls. But the success of this coalition is being threatened, including by the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta's name is now being mentioned as the individual that is sponsoring this section that is supported by Osoche, Sifuna and Orengo within the ODM party to distance themselves from the overall coalition agreement ahead of the 2027 major polls. Now, in this episode of the People's Mirror, we just want to take an overlay, a look at the defense that was mounted by Matiang'i against Uhuru Kenyatta. And what did Matiang'i say that was his own personal statements ahead of the 2027 major polls, but what else did he say that was actually defending President Uhuru Kenyatta? Most importantly, what we want to look at is whether or not President Uhuru Kenyatta deserves this kind of defense, or whether or not President Uhuru Kenyatta himself is involved in infiltrating political parties while calling for democracy with the other side of his mouth. If this is your first time with our channel, The People's Mirror, then please hit the subscribe button so that you help us in our journey towards 5,000 subscribers by the end of this particular month. But other than that, so that you find these stories and more like this daily here in our channel. Now, let's start from the beginning. It is first important to put it out there that Matiang'i's rising to the position of the deputy party leader, of course, of the Jubilee party, is as a result of talks of preparations of his presidential candidature in 2027. Now, the United Opposition has core principles. Among them is Matiang'i, and they are yet to make a decision about who will become the compromise presidential flag bearer for this particular section of the United Opposition by December this year, 2026. Ahead of that particular decision, we have seen a lot of resistance and, of course, a lot of deflection within individual parties that constitute this particular arrangement called the United Opposition. An example is an episode we detailed here, The People's Mirror, yesterday, where Ayub Savula, the deputy party leader of DAP Kenya party, has since now left his party to join President William Ruto's party, saying that there is no fit candidate within the United Opposition that can actually outdo President William Ruto within that particular bargaining power. Now, if you look at the statements of Ayub Savula in isolation, then you might portray a picture of the United Opposition as a very weak camp. Look at them. If you look at Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, who is actually a co-principal, now his deputy has left him. If you look at Rigathi Gachagua, he's still very dominant in the mountain campaigns, but with this particular grassroots elections that the UDA party rather is supposed to hold on this particular Saturday, the Saturday of this week, in the 9 counties from Mount Kenya area, 9 counties from Rift Valley area, and of course 2 counties from the Western area, the turnout of that particular or the turnout in those particular elections of individuals that will turn out from this particular section of the mountain, being the 9 counties, will actually put to a test the influence of Rigathi Gachagua in that particular area. Not forgetting the fact that the governor of the governor of Kirinyaga County, that is Honorable Uhuru, has also said that she intends to go on a door-to-door campaign for President William Ruto in this particular backyard. The Mount Kenya area is also where Kindiki comes from and Ruku comes from, and the national chairperson of the UDA party, Honorable Cecilia Mbarire, comes from. So whereas Rigathi Gachagua is still strong within the mountain, you can see the infiltration that is being done by the UDA party to weaken his support base in that particular area. Then run away from Rigathi Gachagua. Let's take a look at Kalonzo. Kalonzo is now portrayed as the guy that can actually face Ruto head-on in the 2027 major polls. But there is a concern with Kalonzo when it comes to resource accumulation vis-a-vis the resources that, of course, now William Ruto has accumulated within his one term that can actually secure his second term election in 2027. Now, supporters of Kalonzo say that the issue of resource is no longer a problem because if President Uhuru Kenyatta supports Kalonzo, Rigathi Gachagua supports Kalonzo, and with external support that will come from countries in diaspora that want Ruto gone, if they support Kalonzo, then the resources that Kalonzo will have will of course compete adequately against Ruto's resources in 2027. So the list is endless. You can take a look at Matiang'i, you can take a look at Natembeya, you can take a look at Martha Karua, you can take a look at Linturi, you can take a look at the Democratic Party leader Honorable Justin Muturi, who lost an election which was a test ground in Beere North just in November last year. So it portrays an image, an overall look of the united opposition right now as a camp that might not find one candidate that will of course remove President William Ruto in 2027. In other predictions, it has been predicted that the Jubilee party might be consolidating a support base of their own and come 2027, while the united opposition might settle on Kalonzo as a presidential candidate, the Uhuru-Kenyatta camp and the Jubilee party might settle on Matiang'i as an individual candidate separate from the united opposition. But the united opposition still keeps saying that they are united in purpose, and whichever individual that will leave the united opposition camp first will be the individual that will have betrayed the people. Now the question is, will Matiang'i offer himself as a single presidential candidate, not tainted with the opposition sins and not within the arrangement of President William Ruto as the individual that will oster Ruto in 2027? And if yes, Matiang'i can do that and present himself as the candidate of the Jubilee party without the united opposition, because this is a possibility. Jeremiah Kioni had already hinted that if the united opposition do not give them the presidential flag bearer position, then there are possibilities that the Jubilee party will go alone. So if Matiang'i was to go alone, will he be able or will he be willing to bear the taint that will come from it when the united opposition will now be portraying him as the individual that of course betrayed the united opposition? And this is very likely because right now the Jubilee party might be part of this united opposition arrangement, but it is often tainted as the red wheelbarrow within the mountain. And so these conversations might get to a level where the Jubilee party decides to go alone, and now they become the basic point of attack of the united opposition as betrayers. But before we get there, let us come back here where we are right now in January 2026, and where decisions are being made and defenses are being made as we wait for the year to unfold, and of course as we wait for the 2027 decisions to be made. Where we are right now, Honorable Matiang'i 2 days ago was in a press conference defending the position of Uhuru Kenyatta, who is actually the party leader of the Jubilee party and the fourth president of this republic, saying that Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta is a defender of democracies. And of course, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta does not have any history that he knows of interfering with other political parties. So as we promised, we will start first by his statements and then we will make a comment on it briefly. So Matiang'i has now defended his party leader against accusations of interfering with other political parties. So of course, this came majorly from the section of the ODM, as I had explained, that now blames Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta for actually involving himself in the activities of the party to the extent that he is dividing the party position when it comes to how to look at the broad-based arrangement in 2027 and beyond that. President Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, during the burial of Jirongo, also called upon the members remaining in Jirongo's party, including Senator Kaniri, to strengthen that party. So he has been known recently as the president that calls for cohesion and and strengthening of democracies in Kenya. But this has not gone without attacks, including from the ODM camp, that feel that his involvement in the ODM camp is the reason why, and certain sections of members, including Sifuna, are not boarding in this particular arrangement of the broad-based government. So after chairing the first Jubilee meeting of the year, Mr. Matiang'i stated that it is alarming. It is very, very alarming that government officials are getting upset whenever Uhuru-Kenyatta shares his views on national interests. And we must first agree that Uhuru-Kenyatta's presidency is strange. And here is where I want to make a brief comment. You see, President Moi became president after Kenyatta died. So his presidency began on the day Kenyatta died. So for the 24 years that he ruled in this particular nation, there is no single day that he was dealing with the ghost of a previous president making decisions at his back. Kenyatta was no longer in the scene, Kenyatta was dead. And so decisions that Moi made every day, he made them independent of thinking that there is a former president who is staying at home or somewhere in Gatundu who is going to make contrary decisions to this that I am making. Then come Kibaki. Kibaki comes at a very critical time, and this is also very important that we understand. Kibaki takes power when people are already tired with the 24 years of Moi's government, and so they are tired of Moi so much and exhausted with Moi's policies so much that they are overwhelmingly in support of this new presidency. And to back that up, you see how the coming together by different political figures to make Kibaki a presidential candidate and a winning president was done. He was supported in a wheelchair by the likes of the Raila Amolo Odinga and every other person who had their interest shelved in 2002 to have Kibaki become the person that now reclaims this particular country from Moi. So by the time that Kibaki is coming into power, he is overwhelmingly loved. People love him so much, and people are so tired with Moi's government that you cannot say that Moi would still sit somewhere in Baringo and make decisions that would affect the government at Kibaki's government. If Moi tried at that particular time, then most likely those decisions would not have found the light of the day because of the freeness that now people found themselves in within the Kibaki space. And of course, also it's fair to say that Moi was also very tired. At the time that he was now ceding presidency to Kibaki, he had been a president for over 24 years, and so his role as a statesman and his interest to even create it beyond Kibaki, of course, only existed within Uhuru-Kenyatta and came to be, but his involvement in that particular government was not there because he was tired. Then now we take a look at Kibaki. Kibaki does his second term after, of course, the 2008 post-election violence that really taints his record so badly. By the time he's handing over power under the new constitution to Uhuru-Kenyatta, the new constitution has taken away a lot of powers for the previous president in the previous constitution. And so in this new constitution, there is no creation or room for the previous president to actually be involved in the activities of the government. And so what does Kibaki do? Kibaki decides to resort back to old age and to retirement in a very quiet manner and leaves the Kenyan political scene as it is to President, of course, Uhuru Kenyatta's thriving in political success. So President Uhuru Kenyatta receives the country with the new constitution as a very fresh breath, fresh from Moi's regime, of course, and fresh from Kibaki's old constitution that was the only baggage that remained out of Moi's regime. So he enters with a new power, new force, new structures, and he does not listen, or Kibaki himself does not create a platform where he's making policies that are contradicting President Uhuru Kenyatta's policies during the term that President Uhuru Kenyatta serves. And within the term that President Uhuru Kenyatta serves, Kibaki dies. So he's also another president that is not really affected by the decisions of the previous presidency. But the presidency of William Ruto is one that is strange, because with the presidency of William Ruto, you have a president, a former president really, that is living, that is very, very involved, and that is very, very active in the Kenyan political space. And this is a presidential candidate that has his presidential, that has his political party, that was the tool that took him to power as a presidential candidate, and still have interest that he wants to be mounted out of this, of his presidential political party post your presidency. But above all that, Ruto is witnessing the presidency, his presidency where the former president, or rather let us put it this way, Uhuru Kenyatta is witnessing a situation where the current president is his former vice president. You see, so in all that array that we have given, other than Moi being the former vice president of Kenyatta, who was dead by the time Moi was coming to power, Kibaki was not a form of a direct vice president to Moi, of course, and Uhuru Kenyatta was not a former president, of course, to Moi Kibaki. They were serving in different ministries by the time they came into power, and so there was not that closeness of over 10 years while they're in power. But for Uhuru Kenyatta, the person who is serving now as a president was, of course, his vice presidency for over 10 years. There was friendship in it, there was hate in it, and some friendship times of it hit the media space Kenyan people. So sometimes of hate within it of also hit the Kenyan media space and people. So President Ruto's presidency is capped at a very strange time, because he have to make decisions, but while he's making his decisions, he has to remember that, oh, there is a former president who is in Gatundu who can actually contradict these decisions he's making. And based on the fact that that former president and the current president worked together in the space that they were both in the presidency spectrum, it makes the presidency of William Ruto very hard. And also it makes the statements of Uhuru Kenyatta very viewed, so that whatever Uhuru Kenyatta says, whether it is on national interest or in personal interest, is viewed as a calculation to overturn a Ruto's presidency in 2027 and beyond, making that particular arrangement very, very strange. Now let us go back to the statements of this gentleman Matiang'i in defending his boss. Now Matiang'i now says that when Uhuru handed over power to Ruto, it did not automatically mean that Kenyatta's exclusion from national decisions occurred. And now that's the very interesting part. Of course, when you hand over power to the new presidency, it means that you deem your roles as a president. And we have seen democracies where former presidents are alive. What they do is that they go so quiet and they take regional roles and they leave the current president to work. They give the current president enough room to work. But what we're witnessing with Kenya and the defense that is coming out of Matiang'i is that by the time he's saying Uhuru Kenyatta handed over the instruments of power to Ruto, now Matiang'i says that in itself did not mean that Uhuru Kenyatta exempted himself from the decisions of this particular country. He now seeks the national leadership to stop attacking Uhuru Kenyatta or dragging him to what he terms as irrelevances. Of course, I found that very interesting, because if you want the national team to shy away from involving your party leader in what you call irrelevances, then why is your party leader first even making statements that would have him be in situations that are termed as irrelevances? However, from Matiang'i, is now calling upon the national leadership to stop attacking Uhuru Kenyatta or dragging him to what he terms as irrelevances. So he distanced himself from the accusations of his party trying to infiltrate in ODM ahead of 2027 major polls. This was very interesting. Matiang'i is the deputy party leader of the Jubilee party. Now, while addressing the issues of infiltration of ODM, this is the position that he had. He said that the ODM party is currently having conversations of coalition with other parties, and that is against their own interest internally. But the only thing that they are making loud is the involvement of Uhuru Kenyatta, who is actually not in conversations at all in this particular coalition statements that they are having. So the statement that Matiang'i was saying essentially is that the ODM party is already in trouble, and they actually should not say that Uhuru Kenyatta is adding or increasing in that particular trouble, because as they are right now, they're already having discussions of coalitions with other parties, which is against their own party constitution and democracy when it comes to strengthening of democracy. Yet it is the party that is now blaming the fourth president for involving himself within the party structures. So he thinks that he does not love violence, and his party also do not love violence, and there are champions of multi-party democracy, saying that it's their pleasure if their competing parties also get to be strong. So the parties accusing Mr. Kenyatta of interference, he says, are in fact having conversations of possible coalitions without the involvement of Mr. Kenyatta. Jeremiah Kioni did not spare Junet Mohamed. He said that the funds of 2022, of course, came from the Jubilee party, saying that Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta was championing for these particular funds for the Azimio against Ruto. And if these funds were used in a very good way, then the Azimio would have won against Ruto. Now, saying that the distractions that Junet is saying that these funds did not come out or went through Muhoho are just but distractions, while the real truth is these funds were actually released but did not get to the party officials. Now, Now, Mr. Kioni believes that if these funds actually found room within the party officials, then Azimio would have won in that particular election. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, of course, again, recapping that for you here at the People's Mirror. That is over Matiang'i's defense of Uhuru Kenyatta and the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta and the presidency of Ruto becoming one of a very unique arrangement based on the fact that Ruto was the former vice president of Uhuru Kenyatta, and Uhuru Kenyatta still has a party that seeks to have power in 2027 and beyond. We will keep you updated in what happens in the Kenyan political scene as they unfold, and if this is your first time here, please hit the subscribe button.